Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's November 25th. Today we celebrate the clergyman who wrote hymns and poems that used garden imagery. We'll also learn about the man who loved gardens and garden design, and he wasn't afraid of Virginia Woolf. He was married to her. We'll recognize a sculptor whose final work was a touching monument to children, incorporating a bouquet of snowdrops. And we'll hear a hauntingly beautiful poem by an English clergyman and poet. We grow that garden library with a book that teaches how to make garden crafts and projects that are totally within reach and are utterly charming with their appealing and practical sensibility. And then we'll wrap things up with the story of an opera singer turned gardener. So lots to cover on the show today. Let's kick things off with a quick reminder to head on over to the website, thedailygardener.org, where you can sign up for the free Friday newsletter. This is a newsletter that'll come to your inbox in your email every single Friday, and it will have a personal update from me, garden-related items for your calendar, little reminders that'll help you. The entire week of the Grow That Garden Library featured books will be listed right there for you. Gardener gift ideas, inspired recipes, and exclusive updates regarding the show and more. Plus, each week, one lucky subscriber will win a book from the Grow That Garden Library bookshelf. So head on over to the website the next time you're online. Here's today's curated news. Today's news was featured in Southern Living, and it was written by Megan Overdeep. And the article was called, "These Succulent Christmas Trees Are Our New Holiday Obsession." Well, ever since this article came out, I'm seeing it picked up in newspapers all over the place. But succulent Christmas trees are the next big thing. So if you remember the succulent topped pumpkins that were really, really big a couple of years ago, well, now everybody is into these succulent Christmas trees. It's kind of a fun little craft. If you have a lot of succulents that you've brought indoors and you want to put together a little succulent Christmas tree as a little craft to do over the holidays, you probably have everything you need to do it because they're not too hard to put together. However, that said, I know it's awfully hard sometimes to keep succulents alive indoors. So bear that in mind. You may end up sacrificing a few succulents for the beauty, the temporary beauty of this craft. Now, if you'd like to check out this article for yourself, you're in luck because I share all of it in the free Facebook group for the show, the Daily Gardener Community. That's where you'll find any of the articles that I curate for the show. And I also share all of my original blog posts there from the website. So there's never a need for you to take notes or hunt down links. The next time you're on Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and then request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities. Today is the anniversary of the death of the English Christian minister and prolific hymn writer Isaac Watts, who died on this day, November 25th, in 1748. Known as the godfather of English hymnody, Isaac's hymns are still sung in churches today. Think of, "O God, our help in ages past," "There is a land of pure delight," and, of course, there's an Isaac Watts hymn that will be getting lots of play over the next month, "Joy to the World." Isaac's work marked a turning point for hymn writing because he didn't just set psalms and scripture to song. He actually wrote original verse. Isaac's hymn, "We Are a Garden Walled Around," uses garden imagery and is a favorite with gardeners. And I thought I'd share some of the verses with you right now. "We are a garden walled around, chosen and made peculiar ground, a little spot enclosed by grace. out of the world's wide wilderness. Like trees of myrrh and spice we stand, planted by God's almighty hand, and all the springs in Zion flow to make the young plantation grow. And today is the birthday of the British political theorist, writer, publisher, civil servant, and gardener, Leonard Sidney Woolf, who was born on this day, November 25th, in 1880. Leonard was the husband of Virginia Woolf. He was the primary gardener and garden designer at their house called Monk's House, although Virginia did help him. Virginia and Leonard lived at the house when they first purchased it in 1919 until their deaths. The garden at Monk's House was a retreat and a place where they could both escape from London's chaos. Leonard loved to be in the garden gardening. He hated tea roses and floribunda roses, but he loved fruit trees like apples and pears, and he sold the fruits to make money. Leonard's devotion to the garden was a source of consternation for Virginia. Leonard spent so much of his time and money on the garden that Virginia famously complained, "We are watering the earth with our money." Leonard recorded all of his Monk's House garden income and expenditures in a gorgeous dark green and pink ledger book. The first line in the book is dated August 26th, 1919, and he recorded the first gardening work performed by the gardener William Deadman. Virginia described Monk's House as the pride of our hearts. In July of 1919, Virginia wrote that gardening or weeding produced a queer sort of enthusiasm. When Virginia suffered bouts of depression, the garden at Monk's House was where she went to recover and heal. And since both Virginia and Leonard kept diaries, we know today that the garden was a frequent topic. On September 29th, 1919, Virginia wrote, "A week ago, Leonard's wrist and arm broke into a rash. The doctor called it eczema. Then Mrs. Deadman brushed this aside and diagnosed sunflower poisoning. Leonard had been uprooting them with his bare hands. We have accepted her judgment." One of Virginia's favorite places to write was in the garden at Monk's House. She had a small covered shed that she called her writing lodge. Every morning on her way to the lodge, Virginia walked through the garden. The Monk's House garden was the place where she wrote some of her most famous works. One story is often shared to illustrate Leonard's devotion to gardening. In 1939, as the Second World War approached, Virginia called for him to come inside and listen to, quote, "the lunatic Hitler" on the radio. But Leonard was in the middle of tending to his iris, and he shouted back, "I shan't come. I am planting iris, and they will be flowering long after he is dead." After Virginia's tragic suicide, Leonard wrote, "I know that Virginia will not come across the garden from the lodge, and yet I look in that direction for her. I know that she is drowned, and yet I listen for her to come in at the door." And there were 2 elm trees at Monk's House garden that the Woolfs had sweetly named after themselves, Virginia and Leonard. Leonard buried Virginia's ashes under one of those elms, and he installed a stone tablet with the last lines from her novel, The Waves. "Against you I fling myself, unvanquished and unyielding. O death, the waves crashed on the shore." And today is the anniversary of the death of one of the great English sculptors, Francis Chantrey, who was born on this day, November 25th, in 1816. Francis, who sculpted both kings and presidents, was commissioned to sculpt a memorial to two young girls, Ellen Jane and Mary Ann Robinson. Ellen Jane and Mary Ann had lost their father, Reverend William Robinson, when he was in his 30s. In 1813, their mother took them on a trip to Bath. One evening, as she was getting ready for bed, Ellen Jane's nightgown caught on fire. She died the next day. The following year, the younger daughter, Mary Ann, got sick and died in London. So within 3 years, Mrs. Robinson lost her entire family, and she went to Francis Chantrey and asked him to make a sculpture. In turn, Francis honored her request to recreate a scene seen repeatedly with her girls. They would often fall asleep in each other's arms. And so it was in the year that he died that Francis created his final masterpiece, The Sleeping Children. Francis added a touching last element to their memorial when he sculpted a bouquet of snowdrops in little Mary Ann's hands. Seeing this memorial is on my bucket list. The Sleeping Children sculpture is at the Lichfield Cathedral in England. In Unearthed Words, today's words come from the English poet, priest, and critic William Lyle Bowles in his poem called The Sleeping Children. This is a hauntingly beautiful poem, and it was written in tribute to the Sleeping Children sculpture by Francis Chantrey in memory of Ellen Jane and Mary Ann Robinson. And it's just a little excerpt. So breathing and so beautiful they seem, as if to die in youth were but a dream. Of spring and flowers, of flowers. Yet nearer stand there is a lily in one hand. So sleeps that child, not faded, though in death, and seeming still to hear her sister's breath. Take up those flowers that fell from the dead hand, and sigh a long farewell. Thine chantry be thy fame, that joins to immortality thy name. For these sweet children that so sculptured rest, a sister's head upon a sister's breast. Age after age shall pass away, nor shall their beauty fade, their forms decay. Mothers, till ruin the round world hath rent, shall gaze with tears upon the monument. And fathers sigh with half-suspended breath, how sweetly sleep the innocent in death. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Do-It-Yourself Garden Projects and Crafts by Debbie Woolf. This book came out in 2019, and the subtitle is 60 Planters, Birdhouses, Lotion Bars, Garlands, and More. In this book, Debbie shares easy projects and beautiful crafts for your garden and home. With Debbie's step-by-step instructions, you can make a bird and a bee bath, a flower press, a foraged garland, herb napkin rings, herb drying racks, and unique planters, just to name a few. I love Debbie because she wants her readers to use what they have. Go and find your homegrown and foraged materials and make something beautiful with them. Debbie even shows how to make personal and household items that would make excellent gifts, like herbal lotion bars, garden hand scrub, and all-purpose time cleaner. If you're a gardener or a DIY lover, this book is for you. It's loaded with gorgeous photography, and Debbie will inspire you to get out in the garden, get creative, and make something with your own two hands. This book is 240 pages of crafts and projects that are totally within reach and are utterly charming with their appealing and practical sensibility. You can get a copy of Do-It-Yourself Garden Projects and Crafts by Debbie Woolf and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $10. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. It was on this day, November 25th, in 1914, that the St. Joseph Gazette wrote a front-page article about the Romanian-born American soprano Alma Gluck, and the headline was, "Miss Gluck is quite a farmer." Here's what it said. One would scarcely expect a young and beautiful prima donna who is recognized the world over as one of the greatest sopranos to know much about raising chickens. Nor is it expected that she be a connoisseur of tomato raising. Standing beside the window of her room at the Hotel Ribideau, Alma told with characteristic enthusiasm of her farm at Lake George, where each summer she and Miss Jewel, her companion, spend their vacations. She said, "One year we decided to raise chickens. Neither of us knew anything about the creatures, but we bought 50 just fresh from an incubator. Our farmer neighbors told us we should have brooders to keep them at night and advised us to get cheese boxes and line them with cotton batting. We fixed them up as cozy as you please, and each night stuffed the baby chicks in their beds. But they soon began to die, and we couldn't imagine what was the matter with them. They just grew knock-kneed and drooped over. Our cook decided she would make an examination, and cutting open one of the chicks, what do you suppose she found? It was just lined with cotton batting. The little things had pecked all the cotton from around their beds. Well, after that, we hung a feather duster in the brooder, and the chicks hovered under that each night, just as though they had a mother. And later, I myself sawed and built them a little house. We became quite famous gardeners, too, despite the fact that we knew nothing of such things when we started planting a garden. We raised the best tomatoes grown in that section of the state. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Wyoming, Minnesota with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, Kiana Rayleigh, Maddie Doyle, Natalie Decker, and Eric Begay. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Instagram, and listeners always have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. All the stories and books that are featured on the show can be found over at thedailygardener.org, thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. Last but not least, you can share your own gardener greetings on the show by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.